Okay. Hey, I need to check in later. And let me just share my desktop. And if you could confirm the YouTube is up and running, we will be starting the session.
Okay, am I online?
Yes.
Can we start?
Not yet. We are double checking if the YouTube is up and running for this session.
Okay.
All right, you can hear us, right?
Yes.
Okay, so YouTube is up and running. So let me just start the opening. Could you have a seat, please? All right, so thanks for coming the Tokyo.net partial meetup. It's 33, I guess, right? And the good news and bad news. Bad news first, Alex won't be coming today because he said he have to go to America in the last minute. Why it's bad? Because we miss our friend who is sponsoring our pizza. But good news is pizza will be coming anyway. We will have pizza from 8 p.m. And today we have 3 presenters and the guy from the which company was sorry, I forgot his name. Could you introduce yourself, please? About?
Yes. Hello, I'm Hubert Kufel, so senior software engineer at RevDebug, and I'm really pleased that I can lead the presentation for you today. Nice to meet you.
All right, and let me give you the. And I think this should be on YouTube. Could somebody confirm you can see this screen on the YouTube? Yes, I can see. All right, so please go ahead to start.
Okay, thank you. So, beginner's guide to time traveling. Later on, I will show you how you can time travel in time to see what happened in your application, to see what led to the bug. But first, let's time travel a little bit on application deployment as a little introduction. So first, we deployed applications on the physical machines. There were several apps on one machine, right? But it has its problems. The application ate each other resources. So people came to the idea that application have be separated, right? So virtual machines were introduced. Each application were separated. They have each own environment. So that was better, but also virtual machines are really slow, really resource eating. Each machine has its own kernel, so it was not as good. And the latest hot thing are containers. Containers combines the best things from physical machines and virtual machines. There is one kernel, but each app can have its own environment. And I personally think it is great. It is really cool. But then Amazon and its AWS took a one step further, and they thought, what is the best infrastructure? The best infrastructure is no infrastructure. So they came up with the serverless AWS. With AWS, you can just put your code or function on their premises, and you don't have to worry about anything, about the space, about the process time. You don't have to think it. You just have to think about your application, right? And today I will show you one of the AWS services, AWS Lambda. With AWS Lambda, you can deploy a single function, so it and call it whenever you want to perform any operation. For example, I will show you today the data, the label detection example. I will upload the image to the AWS, and my Lambda function will detect what is on the image. And let's start with the example when I will upload this page, the image of a person, the fan art actually of an Alexander Macedonian. I will upload it to the AWS. And after a few seconds, it has uploaded. Now I can go to the properties of the image. And my Lambda function that I just uploaded, that I uploaded before, added the three tags to the image, the human, people, and person, right? So this is what are Lambda functions, the single functions or methods that you can upload and call them whenever you want. So there are grades, but they have one great flaw. They are almost undebuggable. You cannot run Lambda function locally, so you cannot just see what happened if something went wrong. You have to search for bug on the AWS server. And as we know, debugging remotely is not an easy thing. So let me try to upload the another image. This time it will be famous Shiba Inu. Again, I will drop it. Actually, I am in the wrong place. I have to go back a little bit. Yeah, I have to drop it right here. Okay, maybe I will do it the other way because it don't want to cooperate with me. Upload files. And yeah, it is uploading. And in this example, we can see that no tags were added. So now we want to know what happened. And as it happened on the server, not in our local Visual Studio, the debugging is really hard. But what I haven't tell you before is that when I was uploading my Lambda function, I built it with RefDebug. RefDebug allows you to record what happens in the application remotely. So now I can just download the recording on the left side of an image. The latest recording is, this is the list of the recordings. I think that there is the recording with Shiba Inu. I can just click it. It is loaded into Visual Studio. I didn't have to start any other code to get the recording. Just run my Lambda or any other application and I'm good to go. Now when the recording is loaded, you may see, I hope so, that you may see the red bug icon as indicating that there's something worth my attention, that there is the unhandled exception in the recording. I can click on it and click on the node, and it don't want to cooperate with me again. Oh yes, it is. So it took me to the place in code when the exception happened. Now I know where it happened, and I was talking about the traveling in time, right? So now I can click on the back arrow where my mouse is and go back in time and see what happened before. I can now iterate through the for each loop and see what happened before. The variable values that happened during the execution are shown in my code. So I know that they were trying to assign, for example, the mammal tag. But what happened is, we can see it a few steps further, is that the tags count exceeded the 5, and we have the if that if it's more than 5, there is an exception from. So this was a really trivial example, but you can do, but anything will happen in the application can be recorded with RefDebug, and then the recording can be downloaded. So you don't have to try to replay debug if you want to debugging. You don't have to to ask your user to instructions what to do to reproduce the bug, you can just download the recording and search through it. For example, I can also use the search in the particular recording. I can search for the Shiba occurrences in my recording, and I get all the places when the Shiba value was used. So I can know that the Shiba.jpg was the image that I was trying to tag. And this was the example of Lambda, but RevDebug also works with Kubernetes or .NET Core. We try to cover almost on any .NET technology, so you can debug with RevDebug anywhere. And now, how does it work exactly? Let me go back. No. So RevDebug works like a flight recorder in aircrafts. If something crashes, if an airplane or your application in this case crash, you can take the black box and see what happened exactly, right? There is the serverless AWS Lambda or your application that is anywhere. The middle application RevDebug recording server that your application sends data to. The recordings are stored on the recording server, and the software engineer can download recorder anytime he wants to see what happened. He can download the recording and debug with it. He can forward the recording to his colleague, so you can share the recordings. It's as simple as it is. And it works even after your application is terminated. Application don't have to be up to see the recording. Also, you don't have to build your application in debug mode. It can be regular release mode. There is no problem in it. We have also the performance model. If you want just to profile your application, see what happens that on production your application is much slower than in your local machine. You can build application with RevDebug and again profile it for several days to see what happened that your application is so slow. You can have call count of each method, its mean execution time or overall execution time. As I said before, we support many .NET frameworks, .NET Core, .NET 4.5 and higher, .NET standards, and many environments, and we are trying to introduce new environments as fast as they come into existence. So this was the basics of RevDebug. You get to know how you can debug remote applications. You get to know how you can find bugs with RevDebug just by single clicking the red bug icon. You can also search for strings in your recording. If there is no unhandled exception, you can search for bug data. So I think this was it for today. Do you have any questions for RevDebug?
Thank you for your presentation. And I have one question. And
Okay.
where do you hosting your server?
Okay, so the RevDebug record, you're asking about the RevDebug recording server, the middle application, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we do not host the RevDebug recording server. This is the application that you can put on your premises anywhere you want. For example, on the Azure or on the container. And this is on your premises. We do not have access to your recordings. This is application that we provide you when you buy RevDebug, and you can store it wherever you want.
All right, so which means we need the server as well as other info Visual Studio, right?
Yes, because RevDebug is for debugging on production, profiling on production, and it's obvious that when you are profiling on debugging on production, you don't have to run your Visual Studio all the time. You can have your Visual Studio turned off. You can even go home and let your application be profiled overnight. So the RevDebug server take care of it, not the Visual Studio.
All right, this is great because something happening only after we release the application, right? If you have any other question, please come into the microphone to give your questions.
Yes, hello. Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I just have the obvious question, which you perhaps been asked many times. What is the running overhead? What is the memory requirements? What is the like overhead in the code? How slow your code will be executed if you run this with the debug option enabled?
Okay.
With your monitoring system enabled. Your code will be executed if you run this with the debug option enabled.
So the memory required is not bigger than with the normal debugging because we are not extending the life of the variables, but the performance overhead can be from 30% to even a few times slower. But RevDebug provides several APIs to decrease the size of the recording. You can control what to record and what to not. So if the overhead is too big for you, you can just say, I don't want to record that namespace or that classes or that assembly, and then the recording will be faster. You don't have to record everything, right? Also, we have two possibles of recording. You can record everything, including variable values, and this is quite performance eating, as I said before, but you can still choose what to record and what to not. And we have the profiling. The profiling is much lighter. It overhead can be even like from 2 to 20% because we do not record everything, just method exits and enters. So concluding, overhead can be small or big depending on what you want to get.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other question? And there is one announcement from me that RevDebug people are very nice to us that they are offering several licenses which we can consume. So if you are really interested in using this product, please let me know. Fast come, fast serve, and I give you the license away. This is very interesting, and I need Howard. I need you to coming back to the session again to explain how you can do it with Azure. Okay.
Sure.
All right, thank you for your presentation for today.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can just contact me on my personal email, hubert@revdebug.com. Feel free to email me. Thank you very much again.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Jim. Do you want mirror screen, or are you okay with doing this one? It's easier for me because I don't have to turn off all the notification.
Oh, so
if you can survive.
I can survive, I think.
With this screen. All right, and this is your microphone. Yeah, we are.
Okay.
And wait, let me confirm you are on. Because sometimes we do not see you. Could you talk something?
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was really fast.
Yeah.
Not so much of a delay. Wow. Actually, I can watch this screen except when I move my mouse, it's going to move here like 5 seconds later.
Yeah.
Okay, so hello, my name is Jim, and I work at Couchbase, as you can tell by my fashionable Couchbase shirt. On the back.
Too dark.
Too dark? It's the new company colors. We went away from bright red to gray. So I work on a product called Couchbase Mobile, which is an embedded database. You can think of it kind of like SQLite, but instead of SQL, it's NoSQL. And it syncs with the server and between all your devices and whatnot. So really great. And we just released the version 2, which is why I have the version 2 shirt now. Okay, so anyway, I'm here today to talk about the new features of C# in versions 7.1 and 7.2. I didn't put in 7.3 because when I decided to make this presentation, 7.3 wasn't available yet. But 7.3 can be another time because there's a really interesting thing in 7.3 that I'd like to talk about later. But you know, the languages these days, there's a lot of languages out there that are sort of community driven, and the community says we want these features, and the language owner says, oh sure, or no way. And that's how the language evolves. Typically, when you think of C#, that's not the first thing that comes to your mind, because for many, many years, C# was closed source and just like, I guess, a Microsoft monster, if you will. So Microsoft dictated what went in, and basically there was no input from the outside. And that all changed in 2016 when Microsoft open sourced pretty much everything they have besides the Windows operating system, and decided that they want to go forward with more open and community-based model for their language and their framework. And so I'll go over that a little bit more later, but first let's say hello to some C# 7.1 and 7.2 have mostly been cosmetic stuff. There's no huge groundbreaking stuff in there like there was in some other releases of C#, but there are a few things that, depending on your needs, might be useful. But first I want to show you what happens if you try to use them by default. So here you see, oh no, this looks like an error, right? That's underlined in red. And so let's see, well, what does it say? Well, Visual Studio is getting really smart now. I don't know if you can see this error message. You can't make error messages bigger, but it says, I'll read it to you. Feature default literal is not available in C# 7.0. Please use language version 7.1 or greater. So it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. And here's how to do it. I'm going to go to a different project, but I guess I'll stay with the same one. So inside the project properties, build. It's kind of hidden away in here, down here in advanced. This is the default that you'll get, the C# latest major version, which means that if it's 7, you'll get 7.0. If it's 8, you'll get 8.0. But you won't get any of the point releases. For that, you have to choose, you can choose latest minor version, which will give you the latest point version, or you can choose directly the one you want, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. I'm not going to change this one because I have other projects set up. So you'll see in this one, I have it set to C# 7.1. And C# 7.1 has 3 main features. First, which I'm sure a lot of you will be happy about, is the ability to have an async main method. Because until recently, you had to do something ugly, kind of like this. And if you're not careful, you can get yourself into deadlocks by doing this very easily, as I found out. So let's just get rid of that. But you can have here static async task main, and you can just directly await it right inside your main method. Hooray! And you know, sometimes the C# will return an integer. You can also do that for the equivalent. And just like, that's too big. Second feature is this inferred default. So default itself was actually, I think, a C# either 6 or 7 new feature where you don't have to type. Let's see, you can do things like this. Oh, I'm used to a Japanese keyboard. Why is this not a Japanese keyboard?
It's fine.
You're a weirdo. You don't actually have to type. Well, I already. How did I end up with 2 variables of the same name? Okay, but you don't have to actually type string name here. You can get default string, and that'll give you null. Or in the case of integers, it'll give you 0 or what have you. And these kind of tuples, whatever you call them, are also a feature of C# 7.0, whereby the old way of doing things is like this. And again, here, let me just autocomplete that. So you have to access the things inside of them by using .item1 and .item2, and you're gonna forget what those are for, right? So C# 7 gave you the ability to do the cool tuple. And as you can see down below, you can just directly access the it by name. Actually, 7.0, you had to do this. But now you can see that glorious grayed out part which says, don't do that, dummy, you don't need it anymore. And the reason I had this call of function here was because if I want a default argument down here before, I would have to type, I don't even know what I would type here anymore. Like what variable type is this? It doesn't even tell me there. So I don't know, would it look like this? Does that work? Yeah, but you can see how that's verbose and gross and messy. So the compiler is smart enough to already know what you have because you've just set it right here. So this default will be the default of whatever you have here. And the third feature is actually one that's probably not that interesting to very many people, and that's called the new compiler options of C# 7.1, reference out and reference only. If you specify reference out, then you'll get what's known as a reference assembly. Well, maybe you don't know what that is. I don't know why would you, because not that many people use it. It's from the old days of portable class libraries where you would trick NuGet into having a portable library and then actually switching it out with the real one when what's called bait and switch. But the reference assembly is empty. It just returns null or if it's a void, it does nothing. It's just an API surface that does nothing. So you can compile against it and switch it for a real one later. But you can do it from inside the C# project too. I didn't put it in here, did I? And I've forgotten what it's called. But the compiler option itself is /ref out, and then the path to the assembly that you want. Or maybe that was the 7.2 one, actually, now that I think about it. Well, we'll find out later, won't we? Nope, it wasn't. It was the 7.1 feature. All right, well, on to 7.2, because the 7.2 has one that might be more interesting than 7.1. And the first one, I didn't understand this one at first, but now I kind of get it, right? So we all know that these are named arguments. They came in C#3, and they let you skip some of the arguments if you wanted to. But the condition was that you had to have them at the end, right? But what if I don't want them at the end? Let's see. What happens if I get rid of this? Like, what does that do? What is that false for? What does it mean? I don't know. But if I can put this named one here, just for the sake of putting it there, not a requirement for skipping arguments or anything, just putting the name there helps you realize what this true or false is actually for. And it improves the code readability. This one is really simple. This is also a C#7 feature that lets you have binary literals. This is, I think, 81. But before, this wasn't allowed, this underscore here. So it got kind of messy looking like that. This one just helps you make it more readable. This one is actually a bit more interesting. There's a new access modifier in C# 7.2 called private protected. What does that mean? Well, I wanted this for a long time, and I watched them sit there and argue about it for years what to call it. Finally, they decided to call it private protected because that's what it's called in C++. Not the actual C++, the managed C++, the C++/CLI. Private protected. So it means that you can inherit it, but only if your inherited class is in the same assembly. This access modifier existed inside of the intermediate language, but wasn't exposed through C# until now. So here's an example. So we have these two classes, Moron and Baka, and they both come from this base class called Dummy. And Dummy is in the separate library in here. So I have a separate library. This is separate from the program that we're running, right? So you have a dummy here, and it has a public function, and it has a protected function. And there's also this class called tutor, but this is an internal class, right? So you can't see this class outside of the library. I call my library because it's fun to say library. But so this protected method uses this internal class. Why? Just because it does. Forget it. But if I do this, I can't do that anymore. It's going to yell at me. I'm going to say inconsistent accessibility because you've exposed this protected method outside your assembly, but this class he has as an argument is an internal class. So you've violated it. It doesn't know what to do. If I add in private protected, it's restricted to just this assembly and classes that inherit from it, like this class Baka, a private protected override. So I've overridden foo private to say bar private. And then going back to, oops, that's scary. Going back to here, if you try to override that with moron. Oh, where is it? I don't even see it because you can't. It's not allowed. So I have a lot of things like this, probably because I'm just bad at my job and I don't design things correctly, but I have a lot of internal classes that I use in subclasses inside the assembly, but they're public classes, so they're also visible outside the assembly. The only thing I could do until now is to make all those methods just internal methods. So every class of every and inside that assembly, you could see that method when it shouldn't. And I was just hoping that A, I'm the only one that works on it, and B, if someone else works on it, they're smart enough to not mess with it. But I can't rely on the good nature or intelligence of people other than me forever. Someday it's going to backfire, and this is a welcome change to help me. So you don't have to just remember what I said here, because I open a new tab. Or a new window. I don't know the shortcut for this computer. There we go. Now it's cap locked. Oh, there it is. I did. Why is it not showing? I'm trying to show the internet browser.
Drag to the next.
Oh, right. I forgot that it's not mirrored. So, okay, so here I opened up this new blog on dev.to, and it's fun because I write about stupid stuff and I get like 100 likes for nothing. And it really boosts my self-esteem. But you see, I already completed the article, What's New in C# 7.3. I'm not going to show you that one, though, so too bad. Look at this one, 115 likes for What is Git Rebase. But here's the one I did to prepare for today. So I wrote about all of these features in case you want to review. And the second part of what I wanted to show was, okay, yeah, that's right. Oh. Here's the GitHub repo for the C# language as a whole. And if you go into here, you can see stuff that you might be interested in. I'm not sure who's in charge of this folder structure because they have all of this stuff down here, and then they have an empty C# 8 folder. So I guess they're not doing anything for C# 8. But if you're interested, or you have a proposal, or you want to see just like what's going on, what are they planning for the future of C#, you should come here and check it out. One of the ones I'm really excited about is this one. Nullable reference types. That sounds like an oxymoron, but what it is that they want to do like kind of like the Swift programming language, where you can't have null unless you say this variable is capable of accepting null. And if you assign null to it, it's immediately an error. To get rid of all those null exceptions. So it would look kind of like this. This would be a string that's capable of taking null. If you take this out, then you can't put null in here. But stuff like that. They're having a big discussion about this, because if they do this, obviously it's going to break everyone's code, and they want to avoid doing that. So I guess the solution is they're making it an opt-in feature with C# 8. So I don't know why this is not in the C# 8 folder if they're planning it for C# 8. But again, putting aside that, there's all kinds of stuff here. And you can see the stuff that I talked about here in the C# 7.2 folder. I didn't talk about some of this stuff, but like here, private protected. It tells the motivation, the details about it, and all kinds of stuff. And there's, for each of these proposals, there's also a ticket tracking it in the issues, 1,002 of them. But so you can see a lot of discussion. I wonder if I can find the one about private protected. Oh, I wonder if it was written there. Oh, there's too many issues to sort through, but. Litigation, no. Well, anyway, they're in there, and there's lots of discussion about it. So that will be the end for my presentation. So, any questions or just general excitement to switch on the C# 7.2 or even the 7.3 and living on the wild side?
I love main async.
Yeah. Yeah, see, it's very nice. I don't like, async functions will kind of infect you. They're kind of like the GPL license. Once you start using that, it spreads to that code and that code and that code all the way up. Same with async.
I'm very excited when I see the async is supported in the catch after the try.
Yeah.
That was saving me a lot.
That's
now
awesome.
We can do the main async.
Yes, that's.
Async dispose. Async dispose.
Async dispose.
Async disposable is, I think that's one of the 7.3 features.
Yeah, I can't always remember which one.
But
Just try to use the latest one.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff in 7.3. That's one of them. It's they have a new interface. Instead of just iDisposable, now you have iAsync disposable, which disposes things asynchronously, or disposes things that behave asynchronously.
Sometime in the future.
Yeah. So instead of returning a void, it returns a task or something like that.
All right. Any other question? All right. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation, Jim. And we will take 5-minute break, and the pizza is arriving. Thanks, Alex. And if you need to go to the bathroom, it's your time to go to the bathroom. And we will resume the presentation 8:15 or 16.
Yeah, so if it's provided the latest code, it's plain electric. If it's calling all the code.
Yeah. No, it's going to be like it's a warning, private warning, and then if you put on the strong ones, it's by the error.
But if you call into all the code, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too smart for its own good.
And please do your best to eat up all the pizza because we don't want to waste it.
Put the KFC inside. Well, originally it was a server database project. But I work on the mobile implementation, so when you store data, you store it as basically JSON objects, and those get synced to the server and to your other devices.
Next one.
Yeah, I'm not over there though.
No? No. Okay. It's same to me. I sometimes wearing GitHub.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it.
Because I like
Everybody wants to do that.
I work for a startup in Houston,
But nobody
which
wants
is
to actually write it
all the
in
products
Star.
based on Microsoft stuff,
That's a big market.
Azure,
Yeah.
SP Core,
Right.
Serve
I mean,
functions.
Handling the
Yeah, it's
retry
more
with
like a
network,
white label
stuff
solution,
like
like
that, all that
a
stuff is really
a
complicated.
social network. For example, you have a company, maybe you do like a championships or something like that, and we
Two
provide
devices edit the same
like a
document
social
at the same
network
time.
where you can
Not
organize your
connected to the network.
championships.
We need
Uh,
such company to organize everything.
That's the stuff that we
Yeah.
Sometimes fast vendor do not provide enough. All right, guys, who come later, please come in front so that I can check your face in. If you did not show up your face to my computer, please come in
He
front.
tells me. No, I don't really work on the actual architecture. That's the architect's thing. But I'm in charge of how .NET achieves that goal. So that's my domain. That's why I'm all over like all aspects of that because we support buy one platform with it. iOS, Android, Linux, Mac, Windows, and Windows twice. One desktop,
Yeah,
Windows Store.
Is that your first time?
Yes.
All right. Which one is yours?
I registered together with her, Daphne.
Okay, so I need her then.
Okay.
And I need you to give me the full name with the company name later.
Okay.
Daphne? Yeah, please check in. I need your face.
This one.
I know.
Oh, you mean the tag?
Yeah. So I need to register you once, but from second time, it should know you like this. So next time you don't have to.
Cool. What software is this?
That's our Face API of Azure.
Oh, attendee register.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Thank
attendee
you.
register. Sure.
Yeah.
That's like a robot that's not actually real.
Yeah, like no physical form.
It's
As I understand, just a copy paste from one application to another application.
It can do that.
You have to you're running two applications like Bloomberg and some mainframe system, and you can automate basically data entry. So some of the fields are being picked up, analyzed, and then just copy it and save button.
Yeah, so you can do that.
Actually, Night-Fi.
Yeah, but if you have like legacy systems, like
Yeah.
chicken and patches,
Yeah. You can
on the way to, or you have like typists who just be typing from.
if you have like multiple, if you have like a large amount of data, like an Excel file that you need to you need to use that information to update the database, right? Then it takes a long time to do that manually. But
So you're an automation engineer.
yeah.
You should look into Apache Night-Fi. It's a platform for doing pretty much just that. One of the things at least, we showed an example at our last conference of pulling data out of SQL and putting it into Couchbase automatically using the Night-Fi nodes.
All right, Jim, don't move. Oh, you have my name on your T-shirt. That's great. Yeah, looks like you again.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a note of that. What is it?
Night-Fi. It's like Wi-Fi with an N.
Oh, Wi-Fi.
All right, sorry to bother you guys, but may I resume the session if you don't mind? And we will take another time for the networking after the event. And please bring your pizza to your seat, but please keep this room clean. Otherwise, facility people get mad at us. And take your pizza. You can take your pizza in your bags. You can bring the pizza bags at the back so that the people can go in there to get it whenever you want. Could you bring these bags outside? Then you don't have to come in front to pick it up. All right, so let's resume the session. So today I will talk about Microsoft Graph. I have a quick question. How many people are using Office 365 in this room? Office 365? 1, 2. So nobody using Office 365. How about Azure AD? Azure AD? No. How about Microsoft account? Yeah. Microsoft account, right? Outlook.com. And how about Azure? Azure? Dynamics? How many of you know the customer who is using Office 365? Yeah, everybody. So today I will talk about Microsoft Graph. And have you ever heard the word Microsoft Graph? Or this is your first time to hear the word? It was Office Graph before, yes, and it was Unified API before. It kept changing the name. Now it's finally, we call it Microsoft Graph. So let me quickly introduce what it is. All right. So what's Microsoft Graph? You just need to go into graph.microsoft.com. It is very easy to remember. And this is where you got all the information, but I will explain what it is. So first of all, it has all Microsoft 365 data. Do you know Microsoft 365? That's a service combined with Office 365, Windows 10, and enterprise mobility and security. It's one package, and when you get it, you got all the data in the company. And the Microsoft Graph is a place you can get all the data out, and you also be able to put your data in. Then, what kind of users are supported in this Microsoft Graph? We support all users. Work school account meaning on Microsoft.com or your company's account. And Microsoft account is also supported. So when you think about Outlook.com, when you log into Outlook.com, what kind of service you have access into? You have email, calendar, contact, OneDrive, right? So as a developer, if I would like to create some application which works for enterprise as well as for individual, now we can do that without accessing separate endpoint. We only have one endpoint to make it work for both. And finally, this is things I love, is one endpoint, one authentication, one document. What this means. So Microsoft had several server applications, Exchange, SharePoint, and Dynamics, blah, 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 right? And 10 years ago, what if you'd like to get information from Exchange? You need to use Exchange Web Service. How about when you get the document from SharePoint? You have to go into SharePoint SDK to do something. Now, finally, we only have one endpoint to access it to, which is graph.microsoft.com. And we only have one authentication. Why? Because before Exchange, maybe you access into Exchange by using Windows integrated authentication, and the SharePoint with the plain authentication, and then mixed with Forever. So we had so many technologies to make it work, but now we only have one authentication. The truth is not one, but one authentication and one document. What this means, you just need to go into graph.microsoft.com and go into the document link, and you get all the information there. So you don't have to try to find where is the SharePoint information, where is the Exchange information. All the information is lived in the one document link. So let's talk about authentication first. Why? As a developer, we need to authenticate user. Otherwise, we cannot use Graph, right? So authentication for Azure or Microsoft Graph, when you're creating the, for example, Xamarin application, which consume Microsoft Graph, you need to register your application to Azure AD. And yes, or Azure AD, register application to Azure AD, yes. And we use Auth 2.0 for authorization, meaning you can get access token from Azure AD to do whatever you want. But authorization protocol does not include authentication. What does this mean? So when I get access token, which let me access in my file, access token describe what I can do, but it does not describe who I am. On the other hand, OpenID Connect is authentication protocol, which describes who I am, which does not describe what I can do. So authentication and authorization are two different technology, and this is confusing for Microsoft people because Windows integrated authentication describes both who I am and what I can do. Now, on the internet or the web industry, using this OpenID Connect to authenticate you, to identify who you are, and Auth 2.0 to authorize you, that's what you can do. Make sense? Now, I said one authentication for Graph, and which is kind of true, and which is kind of not true. Why? Because Azure AD have two endpoints for authentication, V1 endpoint and V2 endpoint. we have a good reason why we have two endpoints, no worries. So V1 endpoint is for Azure AD account as well as AD Federation. So for example, if you have on-premise environment with the Active Directory and you decide to using cloud as well, then you provision Azure AD and you do the synchronization your on-premise AD to Azure AD. In that case, you may want to use federated authentication whenever you want to use cloud and on-premise resources. So Azure AD V1 endpoint supporting Azure AD and ADFS scenario. And where to register your application is portal.azure.com. That's where you register your application. And which SDK we are using is ADO, Azure Active Directory Authentication Library. Now we have V2 endpoint, which support Azure AD. This is exactly same as V1, but we also support Azure AD B2C, which we support like Facebook or Google authentication. And we also have support Microsoft account, which is outlook.com or any other address. And we have separate portal to register your application, apps.dev.microsoft.com. And we have separate SDK for Microsoft Authentication Library or MSOC. So if you are into the authentication world, you are keep using ADO for a while, right? Then all of a sudden, many people start talking about MSOC, and you get confused. And I can tell you, version 2 at this moment is not take over version 1. Version 1 and version 2 coexist at this moment. In the future, when version 2 really can cover all the scenario of version 1, we may decide to take over everything to version 2. But at this moment, version 1 and version 2 stay together. And we keep adding new feature to both endpoints. And why we have two? Because there are several differences. As I said, if you have a customer who has on-premise Active Directory, who would like to do the federated authentication, you have to use version 1, because version 1 is the only endpoint which supports ADFS. And if you like to support Microsoft account or Azure AD B2C, you have to use version 2, because version 1 does not support that scenario. The question is, when you have only Azure AD account, this happens, right? If the customer is very new to Office 365, who do not have any on-premise AD, then customer only have Azure AD, and which endpoint do you want to use? V1, V2? I recommend V1 at this moment because V2 SDK are preview, and V1 support scenario which V2 do not support yet. For example, device authentication. Device authentication is something like let's say if you are creating console application for .NET Core. .NET Core console application cannot pop up UI, so that whenever you try to authenticate user, it cannot pop UI, so that user cannot enter username password. So what we are doing is device authentication. So if you're using Azure CLI, you may be familiar with this flow. When you try to log in, it prompts you go to this URL by using any of the browser and enter this device ID. So you open browser in a separate computer, go to the address, enter the device ID. Now you signed in. As soon as you signed in that browser, a session coming back to the console application to let you sign in to the console. This is very useful for IoT scenario, for example, if the device do not have any keyboard and any touch enabled, right? But this scenario is not supported in V2 yet, not yet. So there are several ways to decide which endpoint you want to use. But there are several common scenarios which both endpoints can take care. The one is user navigation. This is where whenever you try to use application pop you up the sign-in screen. Then you enter the username and password. After you sign in, application asks you this application tries to access into your profile, access into your contact, access into your calendar. Are you okay or not? This is delegation, user delegation scenario. Many auth2 authentication providers doing that. For example, Facebook. Whenever you try to adding application to Facebook, it asks you, this application try to access into your post or access into your profile. Are you okay or not? So that's the user delegation scenario. Another scenario is background process scenario. For example, if you try to get all the information from the entire company, midnight or every 10 minutes, you have to create a demo or service type of the application with running background forever, right? And when you enter username password, you don't, because it's running background. Then we can use the credential, meaning we can create a password for that service. Then you can embed that credential inside the application and let it run forever. So we have user delegation scenario, we also have a credential scenario. And we also have 3, 4, 5 more common scenario which covered by both V1 and V2. And I have a blog post in Japanese at this moment to read all the detail about what you can do with Edo and what you can do with Enso. You're very welcome to read it, but in Japanese yet. And when I say yet, I have a plan to write it in English as well, in the table too. All right, and the permission, how we control the access, or how you can define what your application would like to do is this format, resource.operation.constraint. So for example, if you want your application to read users' email, then email is actually messages for the resource name. So messages.read, that is meaning the application try to read your email. And if your application try to read all the users in the directory, you can say user.read.all. That's where the constraint comes in. And if your application needs to update user information, then you can say user.readwrite.all. Make sense? And we have, I don't know, more than 60 or 70 permissions in the graph. But if you know this rule, it's very easy to understand. All right, now I will explain the basic, what you can do with Office Graph. We have 7 basic operations supporting in the Office Graph. Not Office Graph, sorry, Microsoft Graph. Yeah, same thing happening for Windows Azure and Microsoft Azure. So now we call this Microsoft Graph. All right, so the first operation is list all the record at the collection. So when I try to get all my contacts, or when I try to get all the event, which is my schedule, it returns at the collection, and we are just using the get HTTP verb and specify the resource with a plural name. Am I sound okay? And the next one is get. This is just getting one item out of the collection by specifying the ID of the collection. Sorry, ID of the item. And another thing we can do is creating the record into the graph, meaning I can create my own contact, I can create my own event, or I can even create my own email. Then we can support update. I can update my calendar, I can update my contact, I can update my OneDrive file. Then we can also delete unnecessary items. I can delete files from my OneDrive. I can delete from SharePoint site. Then we support invoke. So sometimes people say Microsoft Graph is an endpoint to get data out and put the data in. That's true. But we also support invoking operation, right? If I want to send email, that is not creating new email. Because if you create new email, it is sitting in your inbox at the draft, not inbox, but your Outlook. Then you have to invoke send email method to actually sending it. So we are supporting a bunch of execution operation by using the graph. So another interesting invoke is, for example, I can create the event and invite you to my meeting. That's another invoke because I need to send invitation to you guys. Then when you receive the invitation, we can automatically reply, say, I will be attending the meeting. So what if you want to create a bot to do some operation on your behalf? Okay, I usually accept my manager's invitation. So without checking, we just say yes to my manager, something like that. Then batch. So if you're using the mobile application or mobile phone, then the internet connection performance is very important. So if you would like to do the 5, 10, 15, 20 requests, then the batching helps you to overnight all the requests at one time. So we can include up to 20 requests in one batch now. So if you like to do like 100 requests, you can put into the 5 batch requests, which eliminate all the HTTP, the 300 shake overhead. This is easy. Then we support 7 queries because the Microsoft Graph is REST endpoint, REST-based operation which support all data. So what we can do filter to filter the rows. So for example, this example say the users start with J. So we are filtering the result set. Then we also support select. This is filtering the properties we get out. So if you're just taking the users, it gives you all the property of the user. Actually, not really all, but most of the property of the user. Then you can filter by selecting just display name, phone number, email address. This helps you to optimize the performance. Then we also, of course, support order by, and we also support the top. This is take 5 record. And because we support top, we also support skip. And we support expand. This is when you try to get some related information. You can get related to the information with one query. Then we also support count, how many record you have, which matching the condition. Why this is important? Because sometimes when you query, record is too many that the graph does not give you all the records back, right? Paging, right? Maybe first 50 or 100. But count gives you the number of the actual record count. And we also support search for specific entity. At this moment, I think search is supported for messages, which is email, and the person. All right, next. So next up is a Graph Explorer. So now I believe you guys are interested in Microsoft Graph, yes, right? And you want to try it. How you can try it is using Graph Explorer. And let's open new browser and type, what's the address? Do you remember the address? Graph. Yeah. Graph.microsoft.com. Yeah, and we have a bunch of information here, right? Examples, groups. And we have Graph Explorer. If you go to Graph Explorer, you can play with your graph. But what if you don't have any graph? I mean, what if you don't have any Office 365 account? You cannot test it, right? So without sign in, you can just query because this guy returned the sample data back to you without signing in. So if I say graph.microsoft.com/v1.0/me, and what I get is my information as a sample. So sounds like I'm a Megan Bowen. That's me. And how about my events? I have a bunch of events. So let's just filter by subject. I have this event, MPT, what that? I can't even read. Anyway, yeah. So this is a Graph Explorer you can try, but you have to understand how to use the graph, right? I just enter /event, but what if you don't know how to get the schedule. So we provide a bunch of example queries. So for example, if you'd like to get email, just turn on Outlook Mail, close, and all of a sudden you got yeah. Yeah, I know. And now I have Outlook Mail examples. So you do not have to understand how to use it, but just try to get sample and try to just click it. So my mail that has hello world sample request, I just click it. Then you see the address and you see the result. But what you cannot do with sample data is you cannot update the data. You cannot create data. You cannot delete the data. This is read only because this sample is used by the people entire world. So what you can do is, of course, you can sign in by using your own account. But be careful if you sign in with very strong privilege, because this really updating your real data. But only then you can change the information. So for example, I have a me account and I said job title is architect. Then I can change this to patch to update my title if I really want. So this is the way you play with your graph. And the good news is this guy is open source. It's on GitHub. So you can just clone and just play with your local instance. Or if you would like to adding new sample, which should benefit to others, you can create pull request so that the Microsoft people take in your pull request to adding more samples. All right. Get back to the slide. Now, advanced scenario. So far, we just play with existing data, meaning existing email, existing contact, existing my profile. But what you can do with Microsoft Graph, first of all, we can just operate resource like I did, getting data, listing data, update data, delete data, invoke method, and batching. But what we can do in addition to operating the resources is intelligent data. What this means. So let's say I have a people I talk often via email, via chat. Those information lives inside the Microsoft Graph, right? But how I can get out, or how I can analyzing my data so that I can figure out who is my frequent contact. And Microsoft Graph does it for you. You don't have to know it. So if I come back to Microsoft Graph Explorer, and if I try to adding another sample, and we have personal contact, and we also have inside people. All right. Did I click close or did I click? Oh, I clicked sign in. All right, and if I check personal, my contact inside people, so people I work with. So people I work with is very interesting because this is not the data from my organizational structure. We all know our organizational structure, who is my manager, who is my colleague. It's very easy to get those information, but this /me/people gives you more clever result. That this guy monitoring what I'm doing with my colleague and show it to me who you are contacting these days. And this is very, very interesting. Why? Because nobody knows my connection. I have my connection to, for example, seller people, HR people, evangelist team outside my main work. Then my manager try to figure out what I'm doing with these people, right? Then if my manager have enough privilege, they can get this data, or I can share this information to others. Another interesting scenario is when we have new hire coming to my team, I introduce my manager, of course, because that's his manager, right? And I also introduce my colleague because that is his colleague as well. But that did end for the normal organization, right? But if we are using this people intelligent information, we call this social intelligence something, I forget the name, then I can introduce my networking to my new hire, right? If I have a friend in HR people, I can maybe remember who I should introduce to this new guy, but this graph gives me more clue how I interact with people. Sometimes I'm surprising why this guy comes up with my people. Then I realize, yeah, because I was talking with him a lot for the event like we called 2018. So this is just recent information. And this gives me the more like dynamic data all the time. And another insight information is like my recent files. My recent files gives me the files I was working on recently. This is very useful because whenever you touch in PowerPoint, whenever you open Excel, whenever you try to modify Word, then you close everything. Do you remember every operation you did recently? Maybe yes, maybe no. So this recent gives me the information which files I was working recently. So this is the intelligent part of the Microsoft Graph. All right, and this is the interesting part for developer extension. Not only we can get data out, not only we can put data in, we can extend the schema of existing entity. Meaning, let's say you have a mobile application. You are developing mobile application using Xamarin right now. Meaning your application may run on iOS, may run on Android, may run on Windows. Then what you want to do is you want to store a user profile for that application. Because if you change, for example, the theme of the application from light to dark on iOS, you want to propagate the settings to other platforms there, right? And where do you want to store those information? You will create separate database to store all the user information. But you can just extend the current graph because the graph has users. Because you are logged in to Azure AD, it makes sense to just extend user to having the additional profile for your mobile application, right? Then you do not need provision another database to have the profile. So that's what you can do. So you can extend user, you can extend event, you can extend, I think, message. Yeah, there are several resources you can extend, the others you cannot. The only thing you cannot do at this moment is you cannot create new entity. You can extend existing entity if it's supported, but you cannot add new entity at this moment. But this extending scenario is very interesting. For example, if you have the schedule and you want to put some small extra information about the schedule, then you can just extend the schema. And there are two ways to extend. One way is open extend, meaning we just put in the JSON data, and it does not have any schema with JSON. And we also have the schema extension, meaning you can actually create the schema to put the complex type. Why we want schema versus open? Schema, you can use it for the filtering because we know the strong name. Open, it's just a bunch of data in some one row, so you cannot filter. That's the extension. And finally, project ROM and security API. So far, Microsoft Graph is supporting existing Office 365 product like Exchange, SharePoint, or Windows. But now, Microsoft keep adding new features to the graph itself. And one of the new features is the project ROM. So how many of you using Windows 10? Everybody, yay. And how many of you applied the latest patch? Some of you, right? Then you see the timeline icon next to start button. Do you see? And if you click the timeline, what you can see is you can see the recent items you are working on, right? That's a timeline because you are working on some files today, yesterday, the other day. And when you open new browser, new page, it also go into your timeline. Then you can track what you're doing. But those information is stored in the graph. That's why those information can be propagated to the iOS in the future. iOS has an Edge browser now, and Edge has a timeline feature in the near future. So whenever you click the timeline in Edge in iOS, you can see exactly the same timeline of Windows. Meaning you are working on the PowerPoint in your Windows, and you close your tablet, go outside, open your iPhone, see the timeline, you see the PowerPoint file you are working on. When you tap it, it should open the PowerPoint in iOS to continue your work. That's cool, right? Then, how about your custom application? You have a mobile application. You want to do exactly the same, right? Then you can store those information to project ROM, which is activity feed, by the way. So you can store your information to the activity feed, which propagate to any platform. Because all the application using Azure AD actually can have access to this information, right? And we can have the protocol application address, right? HTTP for Webpack, open browser, but your protocol for Webpack, open your application. So we support those kind of things. And another interesting scenario it will be supported in the future is that if you copy something in iOS by selecting and copy, if you go to Windows, if you copy and paste, if you just paste, that copy object will be coming to Windows. But it makes sense technology-wise, right? When you copy the object, you can just store the information to the graph. When you're coming back to Windows, which has the exact same account to log into the graph, you can just retrieve the copied object and you can just paste back to your Windows, right? So we have very interesting scenario. And another new feature is security API. How many of you work with System Center or any other security-related application? We do, some of you do, right? Then each application has security logs, right? This activity looks weird. This activity looks malicious. But each platform, each application have different format of the logging. Some application give us a JSON format of the log. Some application give us a binary format of the log. It's very difficult to analyze everything. Now we at Microsoft providing security API, meaning we have provision one schema asking all the vendors, including Microsoft, to matching that format for the security alert so that we can store the information to the graph regardless which security application you're using. Now, as an administrator, we just need to go into the security API of the graph to look at all the security events. This is cool, right? Because you don't have to go to one application to check log, another application to check another log, go into another application to check another log. But we have central base. And what's even better is, for example, if you have 10 alerts coming, and you are working the first alert, what you want to do? You go into the second alert. But you want to close the first alert. How you can close the first alert? If the application support at updating the log, you can mark it completed. Otherwise, if the log is read only, you cannot mark it updated. You cannot mark it completed, right? So graph can update the object, meaning all the alert object can be updated and even can be extended schema so that you can mark it. This is done, this is done, this is done. So that's a security API. So what I want to say here is Microsoft Graph is not only for Office 365 product gateway, it does, but it also does something extra as well. Some intelligent stuff, some useful stuff, and something very exciting for the developers like me. And finally, please follow Twitter account to get the latest information. Please go to GitHub. We have all the information, the SDK available there. You can get the source code. You can create the pull request. You can post in the issue if you have. And we also have the Stack Overflow with the Microsoft Graph tag so that whenever you have issue, try to find it if the others have the same issue or not. If not, you can create the issue with the Microsoft Graph tag, so the Microsoft developers look into to try to answer your question. And in the Build 2018, we had more than 20 sessions about Microsoft Graph. So go to YouTube and try to find Microsoft Graph and just filter by saying this month, because Build was this month. If you do that next month, it won't be appearing. But this month, you can have this month's video, and you will be surprising how many of them actually presented in the Build. All right, so that's my presentation today. Do you have any question? No? Right?
I'm sorry, maybe I missed that part. Why is it named Microsoft Graph?
All right, so the question is why it's named Microsoft Graph? Because it not only supports Office 365 anymore, it's also supporting security API, it's also supporting the project world. That's why we make it Microsoft Graph, to meaning it supports everything. But at this moment, it does not support Dynamics. So it was same as Windows Azure, because Microsoft Azure. We start from Office Graph, now Microsoft Graph, to cover more. Any other question? Yeah, so Facebook has also Facebook Graph. The word graph is a very big common terminology, meaning you can get the data by using the relation. So for example, before, a long time before, even we had the idea of the graph, when I get my contact, what I did is /contacts, there are filter owned by me. That's something we did to get the information, right? For example, SQL, select everything from contact where owner is me. But graph is something relational. So we can do /me, /contact to get my contact. /me, /calendars or events, and /something to get the data out. That we call graph. That's why so many other services have the graph endpoint. So graph is not Microsoft Word, it's more like the standard. And the Cosmos DB also supports graph. So please do not confuse. Graph just purely mean how you can get the data. All right, any other question?
GraphQL.
GraphQL, yeah, we have GraphQL. So we have some open source technology to get the data out by using graph in a better way. Yeah. All right, so that's all for today, and we will have another meeting and meetup in June, when the 3rd Tuesday. Do you know the date? The 3rd Tuesday, June. Actually, ask Alexa to ask Cortana. Sorry? 21st? Okay, so June 21st is our next meetup, and I need speaker. I need speaker. I said I need speakers, okay? So please present your content. Regardless it's for beginners, for geek, doesn't matter. Sharing your idea is the most important thing. Sometimes people think what you know is something all of us already know, which is not true. So please present your idea, please present your technology. The only condition is it should be something with .NET. And you can present about Google, you can present about Amazon, I don't care. As long as it's .NET technology. Because this is .NET Meetup.
Or PowerShell.
Or PowerShell. PowerShell is .NET name, right?
Basically.
Yeah, I had a plan to separate PowerShell Meetup from the .NET again, but all right, and we still have pizza? If we do, no? A couple. So please eat them up, and please say thank you to Alex or Ined, who is sponsoring this pizza. Right? 1, 2. Thank you, Alex. All right. All right, see you next time.